The next person is probably one of the most generous people in the room, and that is someone who has been directly touched by the work of the Sutherland Center and the Sutherland Foundation. To come here and share her story with us is very courageous. So I want to welcome to the mic Colleen, who is a patient at the center. So we're very grateful. And Layla.
Okay, I haven't done this in a long time, so bear with me. In 1992, when I was 38, I was diagnosed bipolar after a manic episode. My dad and his sister were bipolar. They had been abandoned by their mother when they were little, and from what we know, we think she was bipolar. My dad was put on lithium back in the 60s. He was a great guy, and he felt terrible when I'd been diagnosed with this hereditary illness. I was the quiet kid in the middle of nine. One of my brothers says that our family puts the funk in dysfunctional. There are several family members with the illness too. Some on medication, some self-medicate, and others in denial. My oldest brother Bob attempted suicide in 1975 when he was 29. When he hung himself, it caused major brain trauma, and he lived for 32 years, heavily medicated, in a nursing home. I thank God when he finally died. Another brother, alcoholic brother, wrapped his car around a pole when he was drunk, and he too lived in a nursing home with major brain trauma until he died 12 years later. This brother began raping me when I was 12 and he was 16. He was terrified when I became pregnant at 17. I assured him that the baby was not his. When my daughter was a year old, we moved from Cleveland to Colorado to be closer to my older sister and to help when she had her third child. We lived with them until I got a job in my own apartment. I soon met my son's dad. He ended up being very abusive and sexually abused my daughter. We were divorced when my son was a few months old. My daughter and son are now both successful adults living in Thornton with family of their own. Thank God. Before my illness, I was a busy single mom working and going to school. I went back to get my GED and on to get an associate's in business. I was involved with the union at work and on several committees. I was active in my church and with all the kids' school and sports stuff. After my illness, I was thrust into the Adams County mental health system, where therapists and doctors changed so often they didn't know who I was, let alone who I used to be. I was put on lithium, and depression was now my way of life. I had all I could do to function, and it was a struggle to keep my job. After the company I worked for closed down, I spent most of my time in a chair in the basement watching TV. During the first 11 years of my illness, I'd been in and out of the hospital and in jail once due to my manic episodes. The mania was getting worse and worse, and the depression was debilitating. In February of 2003, I was manic and in jail when my dad, Robert, died. A month later, my son and I went to a talk on bipolar in Boulder. My son went up to the mic to ask a question, and on his way back, a lady handed him a card. I called the number on the card and was soon talking to Dr. Alicia Ross from the Sutherland Center. She explained the services that they provided, and I explained what I'd been going through. I believe my dad led me to the RDS Center. Soon my family and I were attending weekly sessions with Dr. Bross. I continued therapy for several years without paying a penny. Even my parking was covered. I had no job and no insurance. The center paid for me to see Dr. Steve Dubofsky for psychiatric evaluation and meds recommendation. My lithium was increased and a Lamictal was added. Soon the depression was better. I bought several copies of Dr. Miklowitz's book, Bipolar Survival Guide, for myself and my family so we could better understand the illness. Dr. Bross and I worked on my mood charting and on PTSD desensitization from childhood trauma and trauma from the police and hospitals while I was manic. My baseline was still moderate depression. While working with Dr. Bross, I had 2 episodes, and in 2007 I ended up back in jail for attacking my husband, Joe. One time Dr. Bross asked me if I knew that I could live at a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 instead of a 2 or 3, would I? And that thought scared me. I felt safer being depressed than risking mania. She also asked what if I knew that I could live at a 5 and maybe every few years go into the hospital for a meds check. I couldn't fathom that. When I would start to go manic, the energy and euphoria felt good, and I would think that I could control it. And before I knew it, I was out of control. In the fall of 2007, Joe and I attended a seminar by Deborah Amesbury with NAMI in Denver. She herself is bipolar. While I was dealing with my illness, Joe was dealing with his drinking, so it helped us both. We made a bipolar survival guide that has signs to watch for and how to handle emergency situations. I gotta put these on.